I'm down. Tay. It's late. I'm up. Hi. I ain't supposed to be here today. Let's watch this. This is the first movie by Kevin Smith. He's a New Jersey independent filmmaker. At the time, it was coming off the big boom of video store explosions. There were video stores everywhere. They made a nice little profit, and it was just like having theaters everywhere, basically. Except these theaters could hold thousands and thousands of movies at a time. So people needed product. So a lot of schlock got through into the 80s. And then because of that, people were just like getting video cameras and trying to make movies to see if they could get something that would be a property that they owned that was on the video store wall. So after a bunch of people fumbling around and making terrible movies for years and years, in the 90s, the technology like camcorders and things got to the point where you could make better looking movies. This is shot on 16 millimeter, which is like kind of a lesser budget. It's like what Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Last House on the Left. Like it's usually low budget, kind of grimy, grainy. That's the word I'm looking for. I was drawing a blank there. I'm stupid. A grainy look to the film, but because this is black and white, it's supposed to have kind of this grungy 90s look to it, like the music and all that, right? So what happens is Smith gets to a point where it's not inconceivable for an average Joe, so to speak, to make their own movie and get it out and get it published, or at least, you know, get it to somebody somewhere, and you at least have a nice little thing that you made for yourself, and then, you know, Roger Corman puts it out or whatever, right? So in the 90s, people like Smith, Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, even to a certain extent Steven Soderbergh, but he kind of came later 80s, but still same kind of this group. I lump them all together. They're sort of the sons of video. You know, they were created by video. Their film school was video stores. You know, they learned from watching instead of going somewhere and learning how to process film and cut film and tape and edit and, you know, how to light things and how to edit things and all this different stuff. They learned by looking at it. And then, you know, you'd be amazed at like what you can get from books and everything else. So Smith is one of the first of his generation that's just like, do it yourself. Let's just put out this movie, rock and roll style. You know, I'll shoot it with my friends. It'll be like, you know, even if it sucks and we can't do anything with it, at least it'll be like a fun movie I made with my friends. A lot of filmmakers have done that. Really, that's what Sam Raimi's Evil Dead series started out as. The strength of this film, because there's no money to throw at things that are exploding or, you know, just any kind of crazy special effects, no monsters, no spaceships, whatever. You gotta make something interesting, and they don't even have nudity in this. So they have to basically do an exploitation movie where they exploit filthy language, which is kind of an interesting thing. But it really, I read once that it's one of the perfect films to describe the 1990s Gen Xers. It was like that someone did a study once that the Gen Xers used a swear word approximately 2 times per every sentence. And it was a crassness rebuttal to the Reagan era of the 80s, etc., etc. I'm not going to get into that. But this movie does that instead of like blaxploitation, which is, you know, a whole thing for that audience. This is made for this audience, and it kind of speaks to that audience, and the people dress like that audience, and they have all of what that audience has going on in their lives, which is, you know, the economy is starting to decline massively. There's less jobs. People have to work these behind the counter jobs, service industry, whatever you want to call it, minimum wage. And that's what this movie's about, just a day in the life of 2 minimum wage register jockeys. And it's kind of a Woody Allen film in its own way. Obviously you can see the influence of Spike Lee, the black and white grainy. That's how She's Gotta Have It, Spike Lee's first movie was. And I've heard Smith say that Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It was a huge influence. One of the things that gives this movie production value is kind of interesting. It came in post. Like, obviously they made this movie and it was just a bunch of schmoes shooting a movie, or at the abandoned stores. Well, at the stores they worked in after close, so they just had the run of the place and they could use it as a set. You know, classic exploitation stuff. Use what you have access to, exploit it. Sorry, I can't interrupt Jay when he's on one of his diatribes. The music. Sorry. I get caught watching these movies. I watch them because I love them. That's why we watch them together. When the movie was made, obviously they didn't have access to all these like big time 90s up and coming grunge bands or whatever. A lot of them I didn't really have high thoughts of at the time, and even now I'm kind of just like very commercial, poppy, even though they were trying to be edgy. It was a lot like the hair bands of the 80s. But the soundtrack to this was plugged in later by everybody's favorite Harvey Weinstein, who, actually I don't even know if Weinstein did it. This is a Miramax production, but the way to get this out commercially was to plug in a bunch of music and then release the soundtrack as something that they could make, you know, additional funds on. You know, there aren't going to be any toys from the Clerks movie, which is funny because I have some Clerks movies toys right here. But the idea being we have to get some other way to get attention. So like there were tie-ins with MTV, Jay and Silent Bob did some stuff like commercials. On most of the DVD sets you buy for this, you can find like the little Jay and Silent Bob MTV vignettes. Because these characters, even though black and white, which in the 90s should have been like a, you know, no deal. Even in the 80s when Spike used it, it shouldn't have been a no deal. But when they made this, it kind of spoke to a generation or whatever, and then later on Tarantino came on and really spoke to a generation. But this movie alone taught people that you could make your own movie, and it was sort of inspirational to them. Like, well, at least it was inspirational to me. I think at the time people just thought like Smith was this genius filmmaker, the way Spike Lee was, where he's just like he had to make movies and he figured out a way to make movies, and now here's his movie. And I kind of look at this more like, this is a thing you can figure out how to do. Like you can take things that you love, and because you love film, you'll figure out how to make something that looks good and people want to see. Sorry, please don't turn the film off. Turn this video off and press the dislike button at this point. This part with Dante and his girlfriend, this is the other tier of what Kevin Smith does. He kind of does it over and over again. But the reason I brought up Soderbergh earlier is he explores weird relationship ideals or things that provoke emotion regarding relationships. So, how many lovers has your current lover had before you? And, you know, to what extent is, well, I guess this is very 90s, to what extent is oral sex traditional baby-making sex? Which at the time, strangely enough, before this movie came out, or actually, I'm sorry, after this movie came out, Bill Clinton raised the debate of what exactly is sex and what isn't. Instead of just being like a typical dumb comedy that's black and white, nobody would watch it. The fact that it's black and white, the fact that they use these vocabulary words, some of these choices are like art house choices. I almost said outhouse choices. Freudian slip. By making these art house choices, he introduced this to a different audience who thought that this was like a new fresh voice on the scene. And instead it's just like, yeah, this is what 80s comedies look like. It's people being smart alecky and stupid, except these guys don't go on an adventure. They just hang out and they have love lives. And somebody once said there's only 2 movies ever made. Stranger Comes to Town, hero goes on a journey. And this is Stranger Comes to Town. They hold down the fort, and people just keep coming to them, bringing their weird new plots. It's another one of the influences on this is I've heard Smith say is Richard Linklater's Slacker. once went to a Suncoast Video, and on their they used to have a marquee behind them, and then they would say like release dates and coming soon, so you would know what videos to come in and buy. And one of the videos was Happy Scrappy Hero Pup, which is one of the joke titles Randall says here. And the guy's checking me out, whatever I was buying. You know, like checking me out at the register, like checking me out. I don't know what he was into. Maybe he was checking me out too. The point is, I was at the register, and I see the thing that says Happy Scrappy Hero Pup, and I mention it, and I was like, that's funny. And the dude said, you know what, I'm the assistant manager here, or whatever. It was some like unimpressive title, but enough where he had enough to give me like a $25 gift certificate because I picked out the thing that was wrong with this image. So to this day, Happy Scrappy Hero Pup is like a, you know, soft spot in my heart. This Pringles can bit out of the Happy Scrappy Hero Pup. This is another, I guess, probably falls in that Howard Hawks thing I keep coming back with on all these movies I watch, where it's got 3 great scenes, no bad ones. This has got a few bad ones, but it's because it's amateurish, and that's part of its charm. At the same time, it feels like something made by a prodigy that was later on not really particularly delivered on like people had hoped. That's kind of the thing with Kevin Smith. Is a long time ago I saw an interview with Quentin Tarantino where he was talking about John Woo and how John Woo was one of his heroes, but he was the master that Tarantino had grown past. Like, you need a master to get into your field of martial arts, but perhaps eventually you will get to or surpass your master's level. And I think people who, especially in the YouTube era and things like that, the world kind of caught up with Smith. And, you know, it's hard to explain to people that when he did this wasn't done. It was like when, kind of like when Wes Craven did Last House on the Left, like I mentioned earlier. That you're just, you know what, I need to make a movie, so I'm going to make a movie, and it just penetrates the audience, no matter what. It's just so good that it gets to an audience. You know, it's the old rule that if it's worth seeing, people will end up seeing it because it's undeniable. And that's what the deal is with this. Unfortunately, because of, like I say, YouTube and 9,000 channels and everybody making stuff on the cheap overnight, having 48-hour film contests, and the world has like surpassed what Smith gave it when he gave it this. And it was kind of interesting because then Smith reinvents himself, and he's one of the forefathers of like the podcast movement. He kind of, I guess he was trying to do radio. I know he had written some books. He had done some comic books. I know he was doing like a stand-up tour thing, you know, where basically it was a speaking tour where he talked about the movies he's made and told stories about them and stuff. These Evening with Kevin Smith series. They're very funny. I actually super recommend those. Actually, almost even more than these. Actually counter. I cracked myself up. Anyways, so Smith's podcasting endeavors following the sort of stand-up comedy tour thing he was doing became the new way he invented himself, also him on YouTube, and he understands that people listening to him speak is something that's monetizable. He can make money off of people listening to him tell his stories. So, I keep getting distracted by the movie, like I said. But before the podcasts, before the speaking to audiences and telling the stories and then putting those out on DVD, like stand-up or whatever, he would do the commentaries for his movies. So, you know, you would watch the movie, but then you would buy the DVD because you wanted to see the movie again, but then there was also going to be at least one commentary track, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes a video commentary track. There was going to be a documentary. He really embraced what at the time was the Laserdisc format, which then later became the DVD format, and then later on became the Blu-ray format, where you could pile on all these sub-features, and that's what, that's what VHS couldn't offer. It was like just the movie, maybe there was a featurette at the end or something like that, but DVD and Blu-ray and all that stuff with the different menus and things you can incorporate in there, Smith flourished in that. He's always embraced the technology, which is funny because he made, a black and white movie like 50 years after, everybody else was shooting in color. This is 40 years. Once again, this is Walt Flanagan. Because this is a movie for Smith and incorporating his friends, he used one of his best buddies to just keep plugging into different roles. Guy didn't show up on that day, or somebody showed up and read the script and was like, I'm not going to say that someone spits ejaculate back into my mouth. What's the matter with you? And then he disappears, and then another one of his friends just steps in and fills in that role, which is cool because really the people he gets to fill in the gaps are the people that are most important in his life and then keep showing up in these movies. Ultimately, this movie ends up being this bizarre love triangle between what it's like for a man to be in a relationship, but then also have a love for his friend. There's some speculation that this is a kind of a burgeoning, but Randall's gay is what a lot of people think, and that he's trying to steal Dante away from the women. I kind of take it more something that's less explored and more interesting to me, which would be the concept that he has a relationship with women, but he also has a relationship with his best friend or his group of friends, and trying to balance that and the love that goes this way and the expectations that go this way and the love that goes this way and the expectations that go this way. It's a more complex character, and it makes for a more like full life, full story. It's strangely less examined, that friend, the love of a friend versus the love of a lover. For all the backhanded compliments I keep giving this movie, where I'm like, well, it's great like this, but it sucks because of this, and Smith's brilliant because of this, and Smith's not that good because of this. I lean towards the side that this is brilliance, and that's part of the reason I like it so much. And it also is a, for this generation, like I would prefer this over Reality Bites. Like I was alive. This is when I was this age of these people. I was slightly younger. But even now, the sort of apathy and frustration of the Gen Xers with the generations around them, where there's a culture war between the millennials and the baby boomers. It's like traditionally the Gen Xers are doing fine, and they're just frustrated with all the stupidity around them, which is what their whole generational motif was back then. It's just frustrated with the stupidity around them. Hockey on the Roof is an interesting choice. It's so weird. Hockey got really hot in the early to mid 90s. Like the video games were super cool. People loved Wayne Gretzky. Obviously, that was at the end of his career when he came to America and he was on the Kings. But like these jerseys, like the Devils and the Penguins and stuff, it's of the region, but you can tell that it's probably their real jerseys. These people do probably play street hockey. So it feels authentic, even though it's kind of, slightly out of the norm. It'd be like a lacrosse scene now. Who the hell plays lacrosse? But if they make it interesting enough, it's like, yeah, I'll watch some lacrosse, hit each other with sticks, I don't care. If you have any question of how big this movie was at the time, it not only got a spin-off sitcom on primetime ABC that starred Jim Brewer and somebody else. It also got an animated sitcom that was on ABC. I watched it like live. I was home on a summer break from college, and it was on in Tuesday nights at 7, and it ran for like 3 or 4 weeks, and maybe like got preempted for an NBA Finals game or something, and then it never came back. In addition to building a universe amongst his friends who appear in his movies that the people who like Kevin Smith then learn and are like, oh hey, it's Brian O'Halloran or Brian Johnson or whoever. His mom turns up in this. His sister turns up in this. Pretty much everybody Kevin Smith has ever really had any sort of personal relationship with, and then a few local repertory actors end up in his movie. But in addition to those people building his little universe, he also makes a film universe. So, like, this character right now is Rick Darris, and Rick Darris is sort of a shadowy background character in most of his other movies. It's just like the dude who your girlfriend cheats on you with. You know, he's more of a like generic character. That one turns up all throughout Kevin Smith movies. You can take from that what you must, but another thing that really turns up in his writing, like I say, that the strength of this is his dialogue and the storytelling through people talking to one another. One of the important things that goes on in this is people talk about real world things. So in this one, there's a big diatribe where the people go off and talk about Star Wars, and whether or not it's fair to kill stormtroopers who are just plumbers or whatever, you know, and it lets you know they live in our world, even though this is still film world. In Mallrats, he goes more into comic book world, is something that, you know, people talk about and discuss. There's a part where Stan Lee shows up and has just a great scene in Mallrats. It's fantastic. In Chasing Amy, it's more about comic book writers, comic book world again. Like I say, he was a comic book writer, comic book fan. I believe he sold his comic book collection to help finance this movie. The rest of it was financed on credit cards. That's the other big story about this, is him and Robert Rodriguez are always the two dudes they refer to as just like the guys who wanted to make a movie, so they just went out and maxed out their credit cards or took out, you know, sold their comic book collections, took out cheap loans, whatever they could do to get it made. To make El Mariachi, Robert Rodriguez checked himself into a medical testing facility for like 7 weeks and took some drug that gave him diarrhea, I believe. After Chasing Amy, Smith goes on to do Dogma, which is another ambitious project. His career is kind of interesting. It's like there's all this promise with Clerks, and everybody's just like, oh, this guy's going to be great. And then Mallrats comes out, and it's kind of what Sam Raimi did with Evil Dead, making Evil Dead 2, where it's just basically Evil Dead again, except better with more money. That's what Mallrats is. It's like kind of like this. It's like, okay, well, we'll put it in the same universe, but it's you know, color, more silly. It's got more it now happening young actors. Shannon Doherty from 90210. Smith's universe keeps like dipping and growing. Chasing Amy goes up, and then Dogma, everybody's like, oh, there's a lot of ambition here. There's not enough money to execute it, and it seems like an independent film, but it's still, his stock rises. And then he makes Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which is just this dumb ass like 80s comedy. There's a bunch of inside jokes for the people who are part of this world Smith has built, like me, who know all about his commentaries and know about his friends and his family and just all that goes into his world. I'm aware of it. But who is that? That is a very niche audience. So when you're kind of having your stock trend upward, and then you make Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, his stock plummets. And then later on, he makes Jersey Girl, and that was at peak world sick of J-Lo and Ben Affleck fever. I'm trying to remember what they called. Low Fleck? They had a name. Whatever. But they made Geely together, Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck, and that crashed. And then Kevin Smith made Jersey Girl, which is like a touching film about him becoming a father to his daughter, and then his relationship with his own father. The father in the movie is played by George Carlin. George Carlin doesn't get to be in a lot of acting roles. So the fact that that movie gets dumped on because Jennifer Lopez is a teeny part, Ben Affleck is the lead, and everybody was just on the hating them bandwagon, that movie gets kicked under the rug. It's not great. I don't watch it a bunch. I've watched it once or twice. Like I said, it's a touching film. But I love George Carlin so much in it. He's great, and he reminds me of my dad, so it's fun to see him. It's like, hey, George Carlin's here, thank goodness. But then after those two projects, Jay and Silent Bob, and then this, Smith kind of falls off the radar and apparently develops like an interesting weed habit and just like sits around and eats fast food and just gets real fat and eventually has like a heart attack and stuff. The point is, just like Carpenter did, where he gets so sick of trying to make the world understand him and then the critics just being like, no, you suck. He goes off the rails and he does Red State, which I dig. I think it's kind of interesting and weird, and especially Kevin Smith. I could watch this. You can put Red State on right now and I'd say just watch it. It's fascinating. Followed up with Red State, he did Tusk. I think that follows after Red State directly. Yeah, Tusk and then Yoga Hosers. After Tusk, that's like peak. This dude is smoking just hella ganja, and his like vision is out there. And the movie itself is funny and cool and weird. I like it. It's one of my more like Kevin Smith is back movies, but in general, Kevin Smith is also in like the Degrassi High show. Like him and Jay and Silent Bob character turn up in that universe. Then they later on do Yoga Hosers with the two characters from Tusk who just had a small role, get their whole movie. Haven't even seen that one. That's where me and Kevin Smith at with our relationship right now. It's sad. But then following up that, he did Jay and Silent Bob Rebirth. Oh, I forgot Clerks 2 in there. See, man. Clerks 2 was a blatant, like, people only like me for Clerks and Chasing Amy, so here's Clerks 2. And people were like, oh, Clerks 2's like a cute film, like it's meaningful. But as you can see, I'm a fan. I believe in Kevin Smith. I like his podcast universe. I like his YouTube channel. I like listening to the man talk. I like seeing him speak. His friends are a bunch of weirdos. And Jay Muse, Jay from Jay and Silent Bob, appears to be a damn scumbag from everything I can tell. Like, he's just a heroin addict. He had a huge problem with heroin, and they constantly kept trying to get him clean, and that whole thing was just up and down and rocky, and it probably plays out in Smith's work. Like, you know, making movies with my friends isn't fun anymore because critics hate me, studios won't give me any money, fans make fun of me because all I wear is a hockey jersey, and then my best friend's a heroin addict, so it's not even like I can have my buddies in these movies anymore. So it's just like, I see how he got off the rails. That's another aspect of this movie that's going on. Just in addition to man's relationship with girlfriend and man's relationship with best friend, there's also man's relationship with ex-girlfriend. So they're incorporating a lot of, you know, there's a lot of emotional heartstrings going on in this foul-mouthed comedy. And that's one of the reasons to this day I'm watching it and it stands up. I mean, it's black and white 16mm with amateur actors. Clearly something special happened here, or else this would have just become one of the other awful movies I give a 2 to on Rotten Tomatoes, or IMDb. I don't endorse Rotten Tomatoes. We'll get into that some other time. You know, if you're really into this movie, you end up seeing the extended cuts and deleted scenes and things, you know, all that. And this movie originally, to show you how indie and edgy and 90s apathetic it was for the Gen Xers, it originally ended where when this whole thing wraps up, a robber comes in after they're closed and shoots Dante in the face and robs the register and leaves, credits roll. Like, it was supposed to be like this, just like, oh man, everybody was going to leave the theater, like, what a moody art piece. And instead I was like, dude, cut that ASAP. Pronto, Jackson, get it out of here. Whew. So yeah, getting rid of that was key. This format where the story is told over the course of a day, where it starts off, the guy isn't supposed to go in, and then he goes in, and then you know, he works and he's supposed to get off, but he doesn't get off, and then he has to just work till close, and he works up an entire shift, and then the day ends where, you know, he's counting out the register and these people are coming in while he's shutting everything down. That, like, story structure ends up being a story structure I see later on. Like, people understood that this is effective. Like, Waiting is by far the best example, but there's plenty of other these retail movies where that shows up because it's just a solid structure to tell a story. And Smith, once again, because he's kind of a foul-mouthed oaf, just gets overlooked as being very brilliant in what he's done here. There, just very smart writing. You have one character who doesn't speak the entire film, and he's just always like doing the Charlie Chaplin bit. All that. And then at the end, he drops the words of wisdom. So you pay attention more. I remember in, strangely enough, South Park, Bigger, Longer, Uncut, there's a part where Kenny reveals his face and speaks clearly. And it's so like shocking that you pay attention to him, even though it's very normal face, very normal voice, but you're just like mesmerized that this person who never speaks. So now you listen, and I don't know, it's kind of it's a good device to throw into an hour-and-a-half movie where you just meet someone and they never speak, and then all of a sudden they speak, so everyone shuts the hell up. Best fight scene in movie history. Look at this. Did Jackie Chan choreograph this? Oh my goodness, he hit him with a baguette, which is, you know, one step above hitting somebody with a wang. One of the things Smith clearly understood is, regardless of the fact that this was going to be shot in black and white and all the other problems, is the convenience store and the video store, as you can see, works to have a ton of leading lines. So from a real basic bitch cinematography standpoint, there's all these, you know, grids and lines pointing at the lead actors. It's when you incorporate that with all the corporatization going on, with all the branding all over the place, it ends up being like, well, he used what he had available, but it also speaks to, like, look at the corporate world we live in, like this Blade Runner statement of capitalism. And then, not to mention, I mean, yeah, look at these lines, look at, you know, it's just, it's a very elementary filmmaker. But that's how it has its charm. You see the promise there. Like, it's going to keep getting better. And it does keep getting better. It doesn't get great, unfortunately. That's what we were hoping for. But regardless, it's got its own charm. He's huge in France. Damn it. See, they put aside their differences and clean things up. It's a metaphorical representation of what's going on with their relationship. They've fought it out, they've cleaned things up, and now they're talking it out. Come on, buddy. Even though I just tried to beat you up in one of the most amazing fight scenes since they live, go ahead and ramble out. Attaboy. Shows how much he loves him, even though he's just, dude keeps ruining his life. 90s! Gonna have to edit all this and put overlay music on top of it. Alright, that was Kevin Smith's Clerks. Thank you for watching. This one's a specialty niche movie, so if you're here with me, and especially till the end, I greatly appreciate it. So, I'm gonna go to sleep now. Thank you. Go to bed. Alright, let's call this a night, and damn it.